Hello, my name is Lindy Cowling and welcome to my channel. My website is www.lindycowling.co.uk. My email is info@lindycowling.co.uk. And if you do go onto my website, you will notice a few additions to it. I'm revamping things at the moment on the actual website. Very shortly there will be a PayPal button on it and also a donate button should people wish to donate. But also I've added some more kind of services that I do. So I've got timelining on there, which I'll explain in another video, but it's basically to do with multidimensionality, zipping backwards and forwards into the different timelines, what you would call past lives or future lives. I have another section on there which I'm quite excited about, and I might do a short promo video for that as well, called Cosmic Collaborations, which I'll do a video about. But basically I will be working with people in a collaborative fashion that are interested in humanitarian projects, things that benefit humanity in the business world, the corporate world, you know, right the way across. I've got a box on there for that as well. So there's been a few changes to the website. Anyway, let's get launched into this. I'll probably bring promos out, short promos out for those, or you can click on them. They're self-explanatory anyway. I have a few videos that came to me, so going in order of what feels the most pressing or I feel most drawn to speak about. I'm going to call this one The Calling. The Calling. The Calling. So, the calling. In the courses of our lives, we can be poodling along what we feel is quite happily, and I'll give you some examples because I like working with examples, and then it's easy to understand. So we could be poodling along quite happily. We go to our 9 till 5 jobs, we come home, we've maybe been in a marriage for 15, 20, 25 years, 10 years, whatever, long-term relationship or partnership, and it is as it is. So in the example I'm using, we may be not exactly happy, but we may just be kind of going through the motions because we have this limited expectation within us that that's how it is, that's what life is, that you just pull up the braces and get on with it. And many, actually millions of people go through their life like that, not really aware that there is a calling or there is anything else, or that they are being called upon to expand. And others are quite, you know, they'll just continue going on in that patterning, not particularly unhappy, not particularly happy, like I say, just going through the motions really. Now I need to say, I'm not, straight off so you understand where I'm coming from, I'm not saying there's any right or wrong to that. What I'm doing is explaining about what the calling is. So the calling is, it starts as, if it's a gradual thing, okay, we'll start if it's a gradual thing. So the calling can come about in a number of ways, but we'll start in the most gradual way first. So the calling could be this nagging feeling inside, this nagging voice inside that you really are getting nothing out of the job that you're doing. Not only getting nothing out of it, but it makes you actually feel quite miserable, quite sick, that you feel almost like an automaton, like a robot going through the motions, that it's really hard to push yourself to do it. And this has not been going on a matter of weeks or months, this has been going on maybe a matter of many years by then. And the calling would start as, first of all, as a feeling, a disquiet, a disharmony, and then it would become more and more uncomfortable. Now, if you felt that you were trapped and unable to act upon the calling, upon the feeling, the voice inside, that you were compelled to make changes, you just needed to make changes for your own well-being, if you felt trapped that, well, I just can't because there aren't any other jobs if I leave this job, or my family are dependent on me, or, you know, multitude of reasons, or I'm too old to get another job now, the calling gets louder and louder, and then you add into that the feeling of being trapped and know where to go with that. And then really what happens is people kind of stagnate, they start to close down in a way, they kind of shut down, and then if anything they become more like on autopilot, more like an automaton. Now, there are ways to balance out that calling, because they could make changes in other areas of their lives that they felt they could make changes in to allow themselves to expand. So say, for example, the guy in an area of the country where there wasn't any work, and he was one of the lucky ones, lucky if you want to call it lucky ones, that had employment, and he's got 5 children. His wife isn't working because they've got 5 children, the youngest is a baby, and so he is supporting the family, and he feels the duty of that, he feels the weight of responsibility for that. He doesn't like the job, but he knows he needs to keep it to put food on the table and keep a roof over their head. And you could say, well, yeah, he's got the calling, he's got the feeling, really wants to be out there doing something absolutely different. Let's use an example. This is a guy that works really long, hard physical hours, like the example I'm using, and he feels the calling, this feeling, it's getting louder and louder, and it's pulling him, and he wants to make change. The main area of his, in this example, of life that he wants to make change in is in his job. Really, if you sat him down and spoke to him, what do you want to do for your job? He says, you know what, I've always wanted to be a writer. There's so much I want to write about. This man, in the interim, in answering the calling, wouldn't necessarily have to just chuck in his job. He could start, for example, by creating writing, you know, doing that writing in the hours he could do it. And I appreciate there probably aren't many hours that he could do it if he's doing really long hours in the job he really doesn't get anything out of, that he loathes, that he despises. But by answering the calling in one way, once he opens up the energy and expands the energy in that direction, so say even if he could just write for 2 or 3 hours a week, it starts to open up his energy. He's starting to listen to the calling, and the soul and the spirit in him will act accordingly and open that up and expand it. And in the example I'm using, the guy starts, for example, writing 2 or 3 hours a week. Then he's managing to fit in 4 or 5 hours a week, and it's making him feel alive. It's making him feel alive, so when he goes to the job that he doesn't like for 40, 50 hours a week, he actually feels more alive when he's there, because all the time he's thinking about his writing, and his creative mind has been stimulated, and it's starting to change everything because he's listened to the calling, and he's started to act upon it. Even if it's in a small way to start with, it starts to make change in his physical life, and then one thing knocks onto another because he's listening to that. People notice the change in him. People notice the change in him at work. They say, you know what, Jack, you seem much lighter, you know, you just seem happier, what's happened, you know, what's changed? And he doesn't tell them at first because he thinks they're going to feel he's a bit of a bit of a wally, a bit of a twat, you know, he's in a man's world, and if he's this real masculine world of his sin to be writing in his spare time, but he does decide to open up a bit and tell somebody, and they're genuinely interested in it. One thing leads to another. They have a magazine at work, and so they say, do you fancy writing something for that? Do you know what I mean? And this is how it works. You open up, you listen to the call in one area of your life, and it starts to open up in all areas of the life. And in the example I'm using, in the end, you know, it changed in a way, the misery of the workspace, because he listened to the calling and he did act upon it. You know, he didn't have to go just chuck everything and walk away from his job and just focus entirely on the writing, but he brought it in some way. It knocks across the whole element of his life. And there are no limitations to that. You know, I could go on and on with that example, because that's just the beginning of it. It kind of leaks through to all areas of the life until changes are made, you know, and ultimately you could say this guy could go on and be very successful at writing, and because he's very successful at writing, actually come completely away from the job that he loathes, or because he's listened to the calling, he's listened to it, he feels differently about his job, because it's opened up his energy anyway. So he has a different perception about his job. His energy is different within that job. Do you see what I mean? The point I'm making here is, whatever circumstances we are in and situations we are in, we can still listen to the calling. Now, the point I was making there is, it's not always an all or nothing. Sometimes you don't have to chuck everything in, but sometimes you do. I mean, sometimes the calling means a massive, huge change of everything. It can mean a massive change to workspace, massive change to personal relationship, even massive change in stepping forward in sexuality, for example. The calling, it goes across the board. So that was just one example I was using. You know, another example I could use, you know, is in the personal relationship space. Because what will happen is, again, the calling starts as a feeling, it starts as a nagging, and then it becomes quite uncomfortable. There's a disharmony, a disquiet in the system. Now, people have been able to sustain that, not only for years, but for a lifetime, and they've just ignored it. And they'll have ways of getting around it, and those ways of getting around it mostly is to suppress it, lock it down, shut it away, shut it off, file it away. Or they will use other things so that they're in denial. So they'll use food or addictive behavior or alcohol, drugs, you know, extreme behaviors, anything to just shut it out, or they'll keep themselves continuously distracted. Like I say, sometimes for a lifetime you can see this, so that they avoid the calling. Eventually, you know, you could say, well, I can give you another example. Somebody I once knew said to me, oh, when I will always know the time is right for something because of the calling. This person was in profound denial, really, because there are a multitude of ways that you can lock down the calling. You can suppress it in a multitude of ways, by your behavior, by ignoring it, denial, you know, a multitude of ways. The soul knows. I mean, the heart knows. The heart is the voice box of the soul. And we can go many, many years in the ultimate denial of ourselves. And that denial of ourselves actually causes profound suffering, because then we get stuck. We get stuck and we feel that there are no choices, that there are limitations, and we are restricted and constricted. And we feel that we can't change things and we can't shift things. So this is one huge element of the calling. This is one huge element of the calling. The reason I'm bringing this up is I don't think it's ever been more relevant than what it is now, because as a species, I mean, humanity is getting access to its own divinity and to the calling, you know, right across society and right across, you know, the whole world. some people will act upon it, or they will listen to it and find it easier than others, and others will struggle valiantly against it, depending on what circumstances they're tangled up in and their belief systems, what they've been programmed with, what people they're surrounded with. You know, there's a number of connotations here. But in some ways, I feel it's never, in these years that we've been in and these years that we're in now, it's never been more important than to listen to the knowing that you have, the intuition you have. Because I can tell you now, the mind, your mind, our minds, will work very, very hard to keep you out of your knowing, as will many around you, as will the programming, the belief systems, everything else that we're drip fed. It will work with its damnedest to keep you out of your knowing, to keep you from hearing the calling. It will distract you in all the ways it can in modern life. There are many wonderful things we can use in modern life, but there are a multitude of distractions too that keeps us away from listening to the calling. And again, a simple way of listening to your own calling is to step out of your usual circumstances and comfort zone, even if it's to go for a walk for an hour, or go, again, I always say, go into a natural environment, away from computers, away from the noise of technology, away from televisions, even sometimes away from the noise of other people, and just go into a space where you're near water, or you're near trees, or, you know, that kind of environment. Even if it's just for half an hour, an hour, that makes a huge difference. Now, most people, when they do that, they feel a surge of well-being. Now, that surge of well-being isn't just because they're in fresh air or in nature. That surge of well-being is because they're actually tapped into their own divinity again. They're tapped into their own spirit, their essence. They're tapped into their own soul again, without all the noise. Now, some people could go for a walk in the woods and still be trying to block out the calling. You see, there are very, very clever mechanisms that the ego and the mind has in place to try to prevent change. If there's one thing I've learned in my life, especially in the last few years, working with people and also in my own life, is we will do just about anything to prevent change. As a species, human beings, we don't do change without kicking and screaming about it. There are very few in personality that just, you know, they're up for it and they can let everything go and they can do this and do that. There are some, but they're very, very few. Most people don't cope with change, especially big change, huge change, very easily at all. And so there are a multitude of little tricks, if you like, that the mind will do and play, in the ego, and if you add on to that again everybody else's programming or what you've been uploaded with, downloaded with, it's a wonder anyone makes any change. And so it seems to be, in some ways, you know, it seems you have to call upon a lot of courage within to make those changes. So then we go on to still the calling, but then we can go on to the calling. So I've, you know, covering that side of it. But also, if we go slightly deeper on this, there'll be the calling when, for example, you are in a situation, perhaps you've met a spiritual connection. The spiritual connection can come under any of the labels that are going out there. This spiritual connection could be a soulmate, an ascensionary soulmate. It could be a life-changing catalyst, or it could be the twin flame union. It could be any of those connotations I'll use in the example here. The only difference being slight variations on a theme, the twin flame union being here to be an act of service, you know, the template, humanitarian act of service. The twin flame union being here to also clear the bloodlines and all of that side of things, as I spoke about many times before. Any of those situations I could apply to this where you feel within the calling. Now, when you've come into play with either a twin flame or an ascensionary soulmate or a spiritual catalyst, wherever they are on the spectrum, they all have the thing in common where we are talking about soul and spirit here. The calling that I spoke about will be highly prevalent, really obvious, really strong, because again, the soul and the spirit, because of those situations that you're in or were in or are stepping in, whatever variation there, the calling will be even more pronounced, because the spirit and soul within is literally screaming at you to wake up, to make change, to look within, to listen to the real you, your divinity, your essence, your soul, to break out of the expectations of everything you have been downloaded with in terms of programming and beliefs and everybody else's stuff, to break out of the perception of, in some ways, who you thought you are or who you thought you were, and to come into the fullness of the truth of who you are. So that calling will be even stronger. It will be even stronger then, because catalysts connect on those kind of levels. The soulmates connect on those kind of levels. Twin flames connect on that level. And so the calling, because we're dancing around with spirit and soul here, is extremely strong then. So even more so when you try then and go against, lock antlers with the calling, because it's your own soul and spirit calling, the word suffering again, because it creates pronounced suffering. If you're not listening to what your soul and spirit is saying. Now, somebody watching this will probably say, well, hold on a minute, because I'm listening to it, but my spiritual connection, my soulmate, my ascensionary soulmate, my catalyst or my twin flame isn't listening to the calling. So what do I do about that? What you do about that is you take the focus off that end of the seesaw and you focus on you. You cannot make the baby's legs walk for the baby. The baby has to do the walking. People have to walk their walk. So all you can do is take your focus off that and focus on you, on what it's going to take for you to move forward and honor the calling. Because it doesn't matter if it's a soulmate, a catalyst, or a twin flame, you're still being called upon, if in some ways even more so in these circumstances, to listen to the knowing, to feel and listen to your intuition, to Listen to your heart. And again, I can hear it being said before it's even said. Somebody listening to this will say, but I am listening to my heart, and they are in the middle of my heart. Like I said before, you're going to have to swing the focus round back on you and your well-being, because you cannot force somebody, whether it's a twin flame, soulmate, ascensionary soulmate, or catalyst. You can't force them to have their awareness or their knowing. You can't force them to act upon something, because of all the things I just discussed all the way through the video, all the things they may or may not be entangled with, and other circumstances I haven't even listed here, other variations on a theme, interference with it as well. All you can do is focus on yourself, because in all circumstances that I've listed here, there is a profound interaction of soul and spirit with all of those connections. So by focusing on your well-being and being ultimately true to yourself, that is benefiting the connection as a whole, because of the energy connection of these connections. It's benefiting the whole package. By you being your truth and standing in your power, it benefits both. See, all you can do is your own work in that sense. You cannot do the work for your connection. They have to do that. They have to do that. And the way of helping yourself and helping them is listening to your own calling. And again, I can hear it. I can hear the voices out there saying, but Lindy, my calling is to be with my twin flame. My calling is to be with my catalyst. My calling is to be with my soulmate. That is the fastest way to track yourself into suffering. If you want to move through that suffering quickly, if you want to alleviate some of that suffering, you have got to swing the focus back round onto yourself. Because all that does is prolong the suffering for you, actually for both of you, if you keep continually focusing there. Because what happens then is neither of you move forward. Because they continue going round in denial in the hamster wheel, and you continue going round in denial on your hamster wheel, waiting, 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 and nothing and nobody is moving forward then. You've got to listen to your own calling. You've got to listen to that and move forward into that in some of the ways I've described. I'm not going to tell you it's not challenging. It is darn challenging, but it is part and parcel of the process. And if you're in one of these connections, the calling, like I say, is even more intensified. It's not a gradual thing that builds up. It can be very, very much like a pull, a push. You're going to have to channel that somewhere. You're going to have to channel that somewhere. Otherwise, it's going to go down into a pool of misery. And that pool of misery isn't just yours. That becomes a collective pool of misery. I brought out a video on this called the Earl Objective, URL, Unrequited Love Objective. All of that misery and suffering goes into a lovely old great melting pot, a collective melting pot of misery. And just add into that, you're adding to that misery. I know how difficult it is because I've had to do it. I've had to walk the walk. So I truly do know, because I've had to do it. I've had to listen to the calling. I still have to listen to the calling. It's not a one-off thing, the calling, and then, oh, I've done that now. You're continually called upon, excuse the pun, to listen to your own knowing and intuition, to listen to the calling. It's a thing that carries on, you know, as you evolve, as we all evolve. And on that note, I will love you and leave you. Gosh, I'm sorry this went on a long time. I had 3 videos in mind, but I'm just going to stick to this one for today, because it's going to take way too long, and I didn't realize this was going to go on as long as this, because when I come on camera I don't plan anything. I just basically know the title, and then what comes out I just speak intuitively from source, tapped in, so it's not planned, it's not rehearsed. I have to say, whenever I do public speaking, talks, seminars, unless it's structured like a workshopy environment, if I'm invited to speak at an event, I don't plan even the first sentence, and I haven't for a couple of years now. I literally go up there and impart what needs to be imparted on the day, speaking from the heart. So I can't rehearse speaking from the heart. It is what it is. I am what I am. It just comes out. On that note, before I waffle, I will love you and leave you. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for resonating, and I hope that this video helps. Thank you very much indeed. Bye guys. Bye.